Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1997 Oscar-winning movie. It's a drama called Good Will Hunting. Now, Good Will Hunting runs for 2 hours and 6 minutes long. It is directed by Gus Van Sant. It is produced by Lawrence Bender. The script was written by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who actually would go on to win an Oscar for Best Written Script, Best Screenplay, I should say. The composer was done by Danny Elfman, the cinematography by Jean-Yves Escoffier, and it was edited by Pietro Scalia. And the stars of the movie are Matt Damon, Robin Williams, who would go on to win his only Oscar win in the category of Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Let's see, we also have Ben Affleck is also starring in it as well. Stellan Skarsgard, Minnie Driver, Ben Affleck's younger brother Casey Affleck, Cole Hauser, John Mighton, Scott William Winters, Jimmy Flynn, Christopher Britton, Alison Foland, and George Plimpton. Now, we all know how Good Will Hunting was made. I mean, this is one of the top movies ever made. According to IMDb, I think it was like in 87th place of the top 250 of the greatest movies ever made. So, pretty much a lot of people have seen this movie. Unless you're living under a rock. But I will not cast any kind of judgments at all whatsoever. Two up-and-coming movie stars, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, felt that their careers were going nowhere. So instead of just, playing small stock characters or fading into obscurity, they went at it. They wrote a script, sold the script at a meager price of $600,000 in hopes that some movie production will take it in. This was definitely by hook or by crook. It's not to say that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were newcomers in the film industry. They just weren't playing big name characters or anything like that. I think Matt Damon's first real movie that got him noticed was the movie Primal Fear. He was actually in a couple of movies in the 80s, but basically it was almost like an extra, like movies like Mystic Pizza and Field of Dreams. And I think that's where Matt Damon met Ben Affleck, was the movie Field of Dreams. But it actually took them many years for them to finally get noticed. Before then, I think Matt Damon's best acting role was in 1996's Primal Fear, but also in that movie he's playing a pretty small role that did not get him noticed. This script alone got Matt Damon and Ben Affleck more publicity than what they've had prior to Good Will Hunting. You may think that the script for Good Will Hunting was made by virtue of dumb luck. Well, newsflash, it was not. It was two people who truly understood humanity very well in how we function, interact, and were able to create a believable world with people we can all relate to, whether they're likable characters or whether they're unlikable characters. This movie, what stands out was that the way how the people talk, the way how the people interact, it's just like the average people you meet every day on the street. You'll meet good people, you'll meet bad people. The way they act is so natural. It makes you think that, well, they seem to not necessarily fall in the realms of being superficial or enforced. They just seem so natural in the way they talk, the way they interact with each other. It's just so organic. You don't actually look at these people as though they are actors, but actual real human beings. People who we have met before at one point or another in our lives. So, from their experience growing up in Massachusetts, Damon and Affleck have met people like the characters portrayed here and seem to have a better grip on what these individuals faced so that they were able to understand them, which makes this film high on quality. The Academy Awards in 1998 had Matt Damon and Ben Affleck Oscar winners for Best Original Screenplay. In addition, it had Robin Williams as the winner that year for Best Actor in a Supporting Role. And you don't get that from dumb luck. It was because they weren't pretty satisfied with their movie careers. I mean, in some ways, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote this script as a way to experiment. You don't have to be a scientist or have a PhD in nuclear physics to do experimentations. You could be just, a couple of local actors who, by hook or by crook, will write a script. Hopefully, Hollywood will take notice of it, make it into a movie, and boom, you have instant success. And in this movie, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, well, since then, their careers really have took off. And I guess they never really looked back. Matt Damon stars here as the titular character Will Hunting, and a janitor. Maybe I should put that into more technological terms. A custodial engineer who works at MIT, who is pretty much stuck in a dead-end job. But it's not because he's uneducated or because he's a slackabout. Well, in some ways he is a slackabout, but it's not because of the fact that he lacks education or did poorly in school, so he's doing this. No, far from it. In fact, Matt Damon's character has just about equal or maybe even more superior intelligence than the average MIT scholar. I mean, one of the biggest gifts he has is that he can solve very complicated, complex equations in just a matter of minutes. And I don't mean like 10 minutes, I mean something around the ranges of a minute to 5 minutes. Complicated equations that not even some of the most brilliant minds could ever solve. But he just did it in just a snap of a finger. And of course, Matt. So this kind of explains to people why Matt Damon chose to be a janitor at a high esteemed college like the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. When he could have probably did janitorial work in a bar or a saloon or some other crack house. But no, he preferred to do it at an esteemed university like MIT. What does he do in his free time? Well, in his free time, he likes to hang out at batting cages and get inebriated. And of course, he likes to get into some mischief. He also tends to get into a lot of fights, which often leads him to a couple of days in jail without any kind of worry in the world. He hangs around with with a ragtag group of deadbeats, including his best friend Chucky, played by Ben Affleck. The runt of the group, his name is Morgan, played by Casey Affleck. And then another character, I don't know his name, but he was played by Cole Hauser. These guys are basically his circle of friends, a group of friends who he has known since high school. And they're still hanging around with each other. They still are living the life like they were when they were teenagers, carefree. And you might probably think, what's wrong with that? Well, there is a problem what's wrong with that. Matt Damon's character is a genius. And then you ask yourself, why is he doing a bullshit job as a janitor? I mean, nothing personal against people who are janitors. I'm sure they make a living too, like everyone else. But still, universities do need people to clean up. Even though it doesn't take rocket science, it still takes strong dedication and a good ethic to keep our university campuses immaculate. But the thing is that Will is a prodigy. He has the gifts and the gabs to go further in life. Instead of just stuck in a dead-end job, living in a dingy, rundown apartment. He could go further than what he is now. But instead, he'd rather just live casually. Oh well, like even when you're an educated person, you could still live casually. You could still do the things you did. But you got such more potential in you that you're just wasting your life away. That's kind of like where we see the conflicts in him. Though he's all thumbs on the piano, nor can he paint brilliant masterpieces, but he is very smart. Though he does a fascinating job of keeping his genius level concealed. He seems adept at solving complicated mathematical equations, and even some of the most brilliant-minded mathematicians just can't seem to decode or decipher. But he just does it so organically. He also seems to have quite the photogenic memory. Like he can remember things in a matter of seconds, and even going as far as to even memorize what page he found it on. It's a gift that few people have, and a talent like this should never be wasted on washing toilets and scrubbing blackboards. Do you think that this is actually what he wants? No. To him, this is something that he needs. Of course, but hey, the casual life is what he wants. I just feel like his life can actually go better. The thing is, Will has no interest in making the use of his intellect. He even goes so far as to say that he never really wanted it to be that way. Will would rather hang around bars, getting drunk, pick fights, and do other assorted troubles, which oftentimes lands himself in jail on minor misdemeanors. His friends feel that this thankless job is below him and tries to encourage him to take the gifts that he has and put it in good use. One day he gets sent to jail, but then the math instructor who had this complicated math problem on the board right in front of people, if anybody can solve it, when it was discovered that it was Will Hunting who did this difficult math equation, gave him an ultimatum. Okay, maybe not a born ultimatum, but an ultimatum. One of two things. He could spend his long-term jail sentence, or he could bail him out, but under two conditions. Number one, he must be his personal assistant in his classroom. And number two, he must also seek therapy. Of course, Will decided, hey, what can I lose? I'd rather work with a bunch of pretty-faced intellectuals than to spend months with ugly inmates. So he decides to do this whole instructor assistant job pro bono and to do these therapy sessions. Of course, the math instructor, Professor Lambeau, played by Stellan Skarsgard, tries to, get all the top therapists to try to see if they could get some kind of better understanding of Will, but Will just, turns them down, debunks them, and they just simply give up on him right away. But then we also come to the realization that Will isn't neglecting his friend's suggestions just for the sake of being stubborn. And we soon become to discover that Will's self-loathing comes from childhood. Yes, the reason why he's doing this janitorial job is because he is self-loathing. I mean, he spent his early years as an orphan and his youth where he felt very unloved, feeling no one understands him, let alone like no one really cares. So this is where psychiatrist or psychiatric specialist Sean Maguire, played by Robin Williams, comes into this picture. And I want to get a bit on this subject of Robin Williams. Personally, I've always felt Robin Williams to be a very, very underrated performer. Now, here's a guy whose acting career spanned over 40 years. His early years were with the TV series Mork and Mindy, which started on Happy Days and then landed his spin-off. And he's always been known for playing goofy, over-the-top characters in comedies. That's where he mostly seemed to be most noted for. But people also tend to overlook the fact that Robin Williams himself has been in a few drama movies. And he could actually play, well-grounded, subtle, low-key, low-prolific type roles. He was in movies like Awakenings, where that was a drama, and he pulled it off very effectively. Jacob the Ladder, a war movie, and he also did quite well in that too. And then there were also movies that were pretty much dramas, but even his comic use was put to good effect, like Good Morning Vietnam and Dead Poets Society. And he's also took his share of, creepy type characters in the early 2000s movies like 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia, where he just plays it creepy instead of silly. But everybody knows him for playing these silly, goofy, over-the-top, but very funny characters. Nobody ever sometimes tends to think he's very capable of playing dramatic roles too. And here, Sean Maguire, the character he played in this movie, shows he has talent beyond the realms of comedy. Will succeeds in not only winning his only Oscar in his career, but also adding more facial hair to his visage. And though his character is not a licensed psychiatric professional, he just seems to get through the heads of his clients by sharing words of wisdom and never judges or evaluates like most therapists do. While therapists would like to thrill you with their superior intellect and make you feel inferior, well, he doesn't do that. He doesn't tolerate that. He'll debunk you, he'll put you down, he'll say whatever is on his mind, and then they just give up on him. Well, Will was actually doing that throughout a lot of times during his therapeutic sessions with Sean. And Sean just does not seem to budge. Sure, he will not take any bullshit from him, and sometimes it comes to a point where he himself can be threatening, verbal abusive, and even at times somewhat temperamental towards him. But during these whole times through, he will not give up on Will, and he will eventually find ways so that this tough nugget can finally crack. Not to say that he wants him to cry on his shoulders, but to see some progress, to see Will actually open up to him, and to see where his problems are, and to see if they can find ways to work things out. Will is a stubborn man who will not just tell anybody his problems, but it just takes a certain special kind to do that, and Sean is that person. He doesn't want to be really called Dr. McGuire because I don't know if he actually has a PhD. Maybe he's got a master's. But still, I think he just would rather prefer to be called Sean. Not even Dr. McGuire or Mr. McGuire, but just his own name. Sean gets introduced to Will from a math professor named Lambeau, played by Norwegian-born actor Stellan Skarsgard, who helped release Will from his jail sentence by having him assist him during his seminars, and to take therapy lessons, and to open up the world for him in a field of complicated equations and matrices. Will agrees to do this, even though out of being sheerly reluctant and at times very uncooperative. Now, one of the things about this movie is that people are wondering who would be the antagonist in this story. To be honest with you, there really is no antagonist. Maybe Will himself is his own antagonist. You know, he's got a bit of a self-loathing way. He's got a tendency to be quite aggressive in nature and pretty threatening with people who he meets. I mean, there was this one memorable scene where he was going to a Harvard bar where a lot of drunken intellectuals like to hang out during weekends. One day he meets this intellectual guy who was trying to impress some British medical student who goes by the name of Skylar, played by Minnie Driver. But then, well, it was pretty obvious that Chucky did seem to fit in due to the fact that he's not exactly Harvard material. But then Will, who actually has the gift of intelligence, of superior intelligence, actually outsmarted this smartass. And it just worked out effectively. The interactions with the characters just seemed very real and very in place. And they all sort of have a certain level of importance, although I wish some were more important than the others. Okay, I admit that for a movie that was of high caliber, you may think this is a flawless movie. There are a few minor flaws, but it doesn't, like dampen the expectations of the movie. You do need to come in with high expectations, and I think you will be very, very pleased with the outcome. But okay, I admit there are a few flaws featured here that can be quite jarring at times. Will's therapy sessions. He's not afraid of the law enforcement. He has a love interest only placed there with little to no importance. And he's the best looking guy compared to the rest of the cliched ugly inmates. Yeah, not all inmates in jail are ugly people. Or are they ragtag or scruffy? No. And also not to mention the constant swearing and those over the top Bostonian accents can be also quite annoying as well. But then again, hey, what do you expect? I mean, yeah, okay, I admit the movie is set in Massachusetts. And I guess, since Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are both from Massachusetts, they have to really inject the Massachusetts accents. But do you think that it's really necessary to really go over the top in your Boston in accent? No. I think there I mean I know they wanted to create the imagery and the sounds of Massachusetts since this movie is filmed entirely in the state of Massachusetts, be it Boston or Cambridge or nearby cities and towns or even in the downtown core. I mean, just list, but still, I think the problem with this movie is that it's just way too Boston. More Boston than Aerosmith itself. And though it might come across as being realistic, the accents are annoying. The beauty of the movie is that there really isn't much of an antagonist in Good Will Hunting. If there's any antagonist, it could be just Will being his own self-made antagonist. Will is generally enemies with one person, himself. In Sean's mission for him to persuade Will to overcome that burden, but Will decides that if he's willing to change his but Will needs to decide if he himself is willing to change his way. Sean can guide him through the world of trying to help rebuild his self-confidence to get a better understanding of him. But in the end, the only person who could change Will is Will himself. I mean, these therapy sessions are not going to be forever. Sean cannot hold on to Will's hand forever. Sean has to make decisions himself. I mean, they're trying to get into each other. And then, there was this infamous scene where, well, it was not infamous, but it was a scene where Sean asks Will, what do you really want in life? What is it you want to be? And then Will just jokingly says, I don't know, a shepherd. Yeah, I've always had this love for lambs and watch over them. Obviously, Sean knows that Will is not taking him seriously, so then it's like, time's up, just go. I'm trying to make some progress with you, but you don't want to do it. So what's the fucking point? So just why don't you just gallop away, little lamb, and join your little flock, and just get the flock out of my office. But eventually, during a discussion between Sean and Professor Lambeau, Will walks in, hears what's going through, and then he confesses. I mean, as time goes on, Will still continues to remain stubborn and still wants to continue to find other jobs that is below his gifts. I mean, I think he tried to apply for a job in a construction site to work with his friend Chucky. But then Chucky also comes up to him and says something along the lines like, "You want to know something? You're stupid. You know that? I'm not stupid. I know complicated math. It doesn't matter. There's all kinds of levels of stupid. You're stupid because you don't want to take advantage of the gifts that you got. You're stupid because you have some gift that very few people wish they had. That many people wish they had, but very few people do. And you just want to throw it all away, waste it all away over some crappy job that's not going to get you really far in life. You got the ball in your hand. Well, I think it's time for you to roll with that ball." Those are not exactly his words, but it's definitely his words of motivation that it's time for him to straighten up and to take whatever gifts that's given to you. And he mentioned something like, "I wish that I could wake up a day, come over to your apartment, and not see you inside." And then all his other friends are also saying pretty much the same thing, and just saying the same similar advice that Sean is saying, but although doing it in their own layman's terms. Everything that Sean is saying is pretty much the same thing that sort of like vicariously is being passed over to his friends. And even his love interest, Skylar, who suggests that he comes to California with her, and yet he doesn't want to go because he just doesn't want to let go. Yes, I can understand. Boston is his home. Boston is the place where he was born and was raised. Boston was where he put his hat on the hat rack, so to speak. He was born, he was bred here. He lived here all his life. And although, yes, it is difficult to let go, but if you also have something better to come your way, don't just lie on your ass. Take it. Take it with you, no matter how far you have to travel. That's kind of like the message his friends, what Sean is saying, what Skylar is saying. So then, near the end of the movie, after after Lambeau and Sean were talking, Will walks into the room. He comes by. He opens up to Sean, confesses the reason why he is the way he is, and then Sean is like, "It's not your fault," and Will is like, "Oh yeah, I know it's not my fault. It's not your fault." Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. Yeah, I know. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. Yes, it's not my fault. It's not your fault. No, I know. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. I know. It's not my fault. It's not your fault. And then, he breaks down into tears, where he finally opens up and he finally confesses his self-loathing just comes from a bad childhood where he felt unloved, where he felt unliked, where he was ridiculed by his peers because of his extraordinary gift. And the things that happened in his childhood was not his fault. You feel bad for him. I mean, even though Matt Damon's character Will doesn't want sympathy or pity points, there is a lot of reasons why you should feel sympathetic for him. Sure, at times he might be stubborn and border on selfish at times, but the guy is at least going to make the efforts to change, become a better person, become a competent person, and he's going to do everything he can to make himself into a better person than what he has right now. And I think that's what the movie was trying to get at. So then the next day comes, and Chucky is expecting Will to come out of his apartment, and then he's saying things like, "Well, if you don't get your ass out here, I'm gonna fucking kill you." I mean, not to say that he's actually going to, like in a literal sense, but figure of speech. Some people are like in a playful mood, like, "Oh God, you're so dead," but we're not really actually going to kill you. It's just a freedom of it. It's just an expression. It's not to be taken seriously or personally. So then he gets out of the car. He looks through his apartment, and he notices that it's all bare. It's empty. In other words, Will has moved away. He's moved forward. Now, although Chucky could have probably fell into tears or anger, like, geez, couldn't he at least said goodbye? Have a farewell drink? But Chucky then kind of looks, and he's got like a smile on his face, like, "Well, I'm gonna miss you, dude. But good for you." And Morgan, who used to be the runt of the group, now has gotten his promotion to sit in the front seat of the car. Matt has driven away and is now on his way to California, I guess. And that's kind of like where the credits roll. So on paper, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's script might be too simplified and not very climactic. But what makes this movie stand out is how the characters depicted here seem to interact with each other in a way that is real, and never once does it ever meander into superficial territory. I mean, even the way how the characters talk and interact in life, it just seems like an everyday, normal, actual human being. You'll look and listen to the performers' interactions, and they look and sound like real people having real conversations. And then we all know the acting from Matt Damon and Robin Williams are the head of the cast. The supporting cast delivers some great, albeit low-key performances. Affleck here is wonderful as Will's closest friend, Chucky, who encourages him not to let his skill be wasted on mopping floors and washing windows. Affleck's brother Casey also was more apt as another close associate of Will named Morgan, who, although was like the litter of the runt, or the runt of the litter, trying to get himself, a little more noticed. But he's good for playing off some well-needed comic relief. And though she may come across as whiny at times, Minnie Driver as Skylar can understand what's ticking inside of her rather than just be a one-dimensional love interest. She adds some dimension, although I wish there was a little more interaction between her and Will, but she does somehow pull things off in a passable performance. I don't think there was any real particular weak performance here. She just wasn't on as frequently. And I kind of liked her. I mean, her reactions to things was just more natural, like you would probably expect from a highly intellectual person who was majoring in medicine. I love the scene where she was like in a cafe, or was it at a bar? I don't remember. And he was talking about how he had 12 siblings, 12 brothers. And she was like, "Oh, you don't have 12 brothers." And he says, "Yeah, yes, I do." "Well, can you name them?" And he named them like so organically believable that she was she was convinced. Of course, we realize that he's actually just lying under his nose. But still, I thought that was some good moments. They say the movie was not like an over the top emotional tearjerker per se. There was some hidden subtle humor in this movie, and even though this movie was more or less a drama for Robin Williams, he did have some witty banter in there that could spring from some level of humor, but not like like goofy off the top type of humor. No, more like like wittiness, more like just some clever stuff. I mean, there was a memorable scene where he was doing a little bit of some comic act, like talking about how his wife how his wife how his wife had smelly farts and things like that. Or he talked about the story like how he first met his wife was through a baseball game. I believe it was the sixth inning of a Boston Red Sox game in 1975. I don't remember everything about this one because I haven't seen it in a long time, but I do kind of remember vaguely, you know. But the thing is that the movie is not just a coming of age type of thing for someone in their mid to late 20s like Will Hunting, but I think there was also a little bit of some coming of age even from the therapist himself. While therapists often teach or often encourage their patients, about moving forward and to take every level of progress one day at a time, I think also Will himself, his role as a patient could have also worn off on the therapist himself, who decided that, he was done with, doing office jobs and decided that he was going to go and do some traveling of his own. Not to say that he completely quit his job, but, he had also decided to sort of move forward and enjoy life regardless because regardless of how long he has in life to enjoy. But that's just not just for saying himself or even Will, but I think it's a lesson for everyone. Enjoy life while you can. Take advantage of what talents you have and don't waste it. I think that's what the simple message is in this movie. The moral message. I mean, many people sometimes think that movies are mindless, but no, they're not. This movie is for the intelligence. It doesn't dumb you down, and it's very, very strong in what messages it has to offer towards the people who watch it. So, in spite of some minor flaws, Good Will Hunting features a lot that doesn't come across very much these days. It succeeds very well in terms of honesty. The acting, the performances were very naturally done. The characters were definitely full of dimension. And the script was one of the best coming from a pair of novice screenwriters. And I gotta say, this is not bad for what could have been just a game of chance. This was an opportunity of a lifetime. It would either make or break Matt Damon or Ben Affleck, but I'm just so glad it made them because then after that they started to get more noticed in the theaters and they started to become, you know, more prominent and were given opportunities to do other projects in the future and got the notice that they truly felt they deserved. And although this movie felt low budget, and maybe it was low budget, I mean, it did have a feel like an indie movie instead of these like high big budgeted movies that we see these days. This movie is is low budget. It feels like an indie movie, but it is told with such gravitas, with such nuance, with such richness in character. You sometimes fail to realize that this movie is an independent movie. But because the characters make it grow onto you, it just is something that you don't think twice of. So with all that said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Good Will Hunting a 9. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Wright saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.